is true without lying, certain and most true. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracles of one only thing. And as all things have been and arose from one, by the mediation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. That was Isaac Newton, the man who gave us the laws of motion and universal gravitation, copy in hand and a 2,000-year-old alchemical text, not for a class, not out of curiosity, as part of his own personal research, kept secret from the Royal Society for most of his life. The text he's translating is 14 lines long. It's called the Emerald Tablet, and depending who you ask, it's either the most important document in the history of alchemy, a garbled fragment of something much older, or, as we'll get into, not nearly as ancient as everyone from medieval Arab alchemists to Newton himself believed it to be. In the last episode, we asked who Hermes Trismegistus actually was. In this episode, we're going to slow all the way down and go through the texts attributed to him that has had the single greatest influence on Western esotericism and mathematics, line by line, in Newton's own words, and figure out what it actually meant before pop culture flattened it into a bumper sticker. Part 1. Where the tablet actually came from. Before we go line by line, we need to correct something that even serious people that talk about the Emerald Tablet get wrong. The Emerald Tablet is not part of the Corpus Hermeticum that we discussed in the last episode. The Corpus Hermeticum, remember, is a collection of Greek philosophical dialogues written in Roman Egypt, likely Greek Egypt, during the Ptolemaic Empire. Roughly, from the copy we have, written on the 2nd or 3rd century CE. The Emerald Tablet has a completely separate story, as it emerges much later in a different language in a different empire. The earliest versions we have of the Emerald Tablet are in Arabic, appearing in texts from around the 8th or 9th century CE, during the Islamic Golden Age, centuries after the Corpus Hermeticum was written. Scholars believed it originally circulated part of a larger work called the Kitab Sir al-Khalika, the Book of the Secret of Creation, a text concerned in cosmology and natural philosophy, traditionally associated with a figure called Balinus, who scholars generally identified with the Greco-Roman philosopher Apollonius de Tyana. Though, much like Hermes himself, this attribution is almost certainly legendary rather than literal. So here's the actual chain of transmission as best the scholarship reconstructs it. Some combination of late antique Greek natural philosophy and Egyptian Hermetic ideas got absorbed into Arabic alchemical and philosophical writing during the 8th and 9th centuries. During the Emerald Tablet appears as a short cryptic summary text, the kind of thing meant to be memorized, almost like a mnemonic formula at the heart of a larger cosmological work. From there, it entered Latin Europe through the great wave of Arabic to Latin translation that happened in the 12th century, the same intellectual current that brought Aristotle complete works, Arabic mathematics and Islamic medicine into Europe universities. The Emerald Tablet got swept into Latin alchemical literature during this period, most notably through a text called the Secretum Secretorum, and from there it became one of the fundamental texts of European alchemy for the next 500 years. By the time it reached Newton in the 1600s, the tablet had already been commented on, expanded, and interpreted by centuries of alchemists, most famously by a medieval commentator known as Ortaculanus, whose line-by-line commentary became the standard lens through which European alchemists read the text. So when we say the Emerald Tablet is Hermetic, what we actually mean is it's a text that carries the name and authority of Hermes Trismegistus, produced in the Islamic world using older Hellenistic philosophical material, transmitted into the Latin Christendom, and ultimately absorbed into the same broad tradition as the Corpus Hermeticum, even though the two have almost entirely separate textual histories. They converge on a shared name and a shared philosophical outlook, not a shared origin. This matters because it changes how we should read the text. It's not one ancient prophet, direct revelation. It's the compressed, portable core of a much larger cosmological worldview, an introduction manual distilled down to 14 lines, meant to be carried in the mind, not just read once and set aside. Part 2, line by line. We're going to work through Newton's translation, which beyond the historical importance is a document of its own intellectual life, happens to be clear, direct English that holds up well for a modern audience. I'll read each line, then unpack what it meant to the alchemists who actually used this text as a working document, not a poem. The translation comes from a Latin text, not a Greek one like the Corpus Hermeticum. Line 1. This true without lying, certain and most true. This opens with an oath of authenticity, an unusual, forceful one. Alchemical texts often open this way, insisting on their own truthfulness, partly because of such of an alchemical tradition was concerned with distinguishing real knowledge from charlatanism. Remember, alchemy in this period existed alongside a great deal of outright fraud, people selling fake transmutation processes to wealthy patrons. An opening insistence on truth was in a sense a general convention, but also a signal that what follows should be read as technically precise, not merely poetic. Line 2. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, due to the miracles of one only thing. This is the line everyone knows, usually shortened to as above, so below. And it is almost always stripped of its actual ending, due to the miracles of only one thing. That ending matters enormously because it tells you this isn't a general statement about cosmic symmetry for its own sake. It's describing a method. The correspondence between above and below is being invoked specifically to explain how a single substance, one only thing, can produce transformative effects. In the alchemical reading, above refers to celestial, spiritual, or subtle processes, and below refers to earthly, material, physical processes. The claim is that the same underlying principle governs both, which is precisely why an alchemist believed that manipulating physical substances in a laboratory could have effects on, or reflect truths about, the spiritual or cosmic order. This is the philosophical foundation that makes alchemy make sense in a coherent worldview, rather than superstition. Matter and spirit aren't separate domains obeying separate rules. They are two expressions of the one underlying process. Line 3. And as all things have been made and arose from one, by the mediation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. Here, the text moves from correspondence to origin. Everything that exists is said to descend from a single source, one, through a process of mediation. This echoes the immationist cosmology we saw in the Corpus Hermeticum in the last episode, reality unfolding downward from unity into multiplicity. By adaptation is key alchemical vocabulary. It implies that the source doesn't create different things arbitrarily, but rather the same underlying substance takes different forms depending on the conditions it passes through. For a working alchemist, this is the theoretical justification for transmutation, if all matter ultimately derives from one underlying substance that merely adapts into different forms. Then in principle, one form, lead, say, could be induced to adapt into another, gold. Line 4. The sun is its father, the moon its mother. Now the text gets specific about the process, using planetary and gender symbolism that runs through the entire alchemical tradition. The sun represents active, hot, masculine principle, in practical alchemy often associated with sulfur. The moon represents the receptive, cool, feminine principle associated with Mercury. This isn't about actual celestial bodies. It's a symbolic shorthand alchemists use constantly because the tradition believed metals and processes on Earth were governed by or corresponded to the same 7 classical planets that govern the heavens, another expression of the as above, so below principle from line 2. Line 5. The wind had carried it in its belly, so earth its nurse. Continuing the birth metaphor, air and earth are added as the remaining 2 classical elements, alongside fire, the sun, and water associated with the moon in some readings. The wind carrying it in its belly describes a gestation phase in practical laboratory terms. Many alchemists read this as referring to volatilization, a substance becoming airborne or vaporous, using a chemical process being before nursed back into solid and earthly form. Whether or not you find the underlying chemistry credible by modern standards, notice the precision being attempted here. This reads far more like a technical process description than a vague mystical image. Line 6. The Father of all perfection in the whole world is here. A declaration that whatever substance or process is being described, often called the philosopher's stone, is the broad tradition represents the highest achievable perfection available in the physical world. This is the line that anchors the entire tradition's ultimate goal, not simply making gold as a commodity, but achieving material perfection, which many alchemists, including importantly Newton or Maria Brea, understood as inseparable from spiritual or intellectual perfection. Line 7. Its force or power is entire if it be converted into earth. A technically dense line even for alchemists themselves, generally interpreted as describing a stage where the volatile substance from line 5 must be brought back into a solid, stable form to be usable. The force is described as only being complete or fully realized once fixed. A recurring theme in alchemy, raw potential vaporous substances mean little until stabilized into a workable permanent form. Line 8. Separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. Here is a direct laboratory instruction. Separate the subtle from the gross is a standard alchemical language for purification, removing impurities to isolate the essential, active principle from an earth waste material. Sweetly meaning gently, and with great industry meaning with sustained, careful effort, are practical warnings. Rush this process or apply excessive heat carelessly, and you ruin the substance. This is as close as the tablet goes to reading like an actual recipe. Line 9. It ascends from the earth to the heavens, and again it descends to the earth and receives the force of things superior and inferior. A description of a cyclical process, matter rising and falling repeatedly, gathering power from both the superior celestial realm and the inferior earthly realm each time. In practical chemical terms, many readers connect this to distillation, a substance repeatedly vaporized and condensed, a process alchemists perform literally in their laboratories using a physical enactment of the cosmological principle from line 2, below reflecting above and over, each cycle refining the substance farther. Line 10. By this means you shall have the glory of the world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. The promised outcome, total mastery, described in maximalism terms, obscurity, fleeing suggests not just material wealth, just genuine illumination or understanding again reinforcing that the goal here was never purely economic. Line 11. This is the strongest force of all forces, for it overcomes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. A claim of near total power for the completed substance, able to affect both subtle, spiritual, airy, intangible, and solid, physical, material things alike. This is the line most directly connected to the tablet's alchemy to a broader metaphysical claim that whatever this substance represents operates across the entirety of the hierarchy of reality, not merely within ordinary chemistry. Line 12. So was the world created. A striking pivot. The process just describes isn't a laboratory procedure. It's being equated with cosmogony itself, the creation of the world. This line is why so many scholar practitioners read the Emerald Tablet as fundamental, a cosmological text using an alchemical metaphor, rather than a chemistry manual using cosmological metaphors. The emphasis runs in the direction of the universe itself works this way, with the laboratory process serving as a small-scale reenactment of the cosmic process, once again completing the above and the below, looped from the two lines. Line 13. From this will be and will emerge admirable adaptations, of which the way is here. A closing acknowledgement that the text is compressed, that what's been given is a key or method, not an exhaustive account, and that further discoveries, admirable adaptations, will follow from correctly grasping the principles just described. Line 14. And for this reason I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of philosophy to the whole world. And here, finally, is the origin of the epithet we opened episode 1 with. Newton's manuscript actually includes a note explaining this line further. That Hermes is called thrice greatest because he possesses three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. Historically, this has usually been interpreted as referring to alchemy, astrology, and theurgy, or in some readings, the three domains of the mineral, vegetable, and animal world. Three separate disciplines of ancient wisdom unified in one figure. Whichever specified triad you go with, the underlying claims is the same one we traced in the last episode. Total unified mastery across the entire structure of ancient knowledge. Part 3. What Newton was actually doing with this. It's worth pausing on why a man remembered today as the founder of modern physics and calculus spent so much serious effort on a text like this. By the standards of his own time, Newton wasn't doing anything unusual. In the 17th century, the sharp modern line we draw between science and alchemy simply did not exist. Natural philosophy, it was a broad category that would eventually split into physics, chemistry, and other sciences. It still included investigation into hidden or occult forces in nature, magnetism, gravity, and the transformative properties of matter were all, in one sense, part of the same open question. Newton's own theory of universal gravity proposes an invisible force acting at a distance between two objects, which too many of its contemporaries looked uncomfortably close to occult action, and which Newton himself struggled to explain mechanically. Newton kept extensive alchemical notebooks, many still preserved, including his Emerald Tablet translation, because he believed ancient thinkers had once possessed genuine, sophisticated knowledge of nature's hidden operations, knowledge he thought had been partially lost or deliberately encoded in symbolic texts like this one. His alchemical work wasn't a side hobby discounted from his scientific work. It was, in his own mind, part of the same overarching project, recovering true knowledge of how nature operates, whether that knowledge showed up in mathematical laws of motion or in cryptic Hermetic formulas about the sun and the moon. This is worth sitting with because it complicates a very common and modern narrative. that history moved cleanly from superstition to science, with figures like Newton representing the clean break. The reality is messier and honestly more interesting. The same mind that gave us calculus and the laws of universal gravitation spent decades convinced that a 2,000-year-old alchemical text attributed to a legendary Egyptian Greek sage contained a compressed key to the fundamental workings of the universe. Whether or not you find this alchemist's specific claim credible or the underlying instinct that there might be one unifying principle beneath the apparent diversity of physical phenomena, it is not coincidental. The same instinct that drives modern theoretical physics search for a unified theory. We'll come back to the connection directly in a future episode. In closing, so what is the Emerald Tablet? Once we strip away both the exaggerated ancient pedigree and the flattened modern bumper sticker version of above so below, it is compressed cosmological formula produces somewhere in an early Islamic world from older Hellenistic material that describes the universe in a single unified process expressing itself simultaneously across matter and spirit, above and below laboratory and cosmos, and it convinced serious, rigorous thinkers right up through the birth of modern science that understanding was worth a lifetime of study. And believe it or not, some of the stories and passages and epithets of the Corpus Hermeticum are going to ring true with modern quantum mechanics and modern physics. 14 lines, centuries of commentary, and one line at the very end, quietly explaining the same this entire tradition is built upon. On the next episode, we're going to look at the Corpus Hermeticum's account of the mind and the cosmos in more detail and start building the bridge towards the modern physics comparisons this channel is ultimately built towards. If this is kind of close source reading is where you're here, please subscribe, like. We're just getting started. Thank you very much.